Now, back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Help! I need somebody. Help! Not just anybody. Help! You know I need someone. Help!
Hey, and welcome back to The Law Show on CL 650. I'm Zach Spencer, and we're talking about personal injury, mostly about car accidents, and we have from Macquarie Hunter, Kevin Hyde, partner at Macquarie Hunter, and Nate Hartney, associate at Macquarie Hunter. And you have 7 lawyers in your personal injury department there?
Yeah, we have about 32 right now at the firm in all different areas of law and 7 lawyers in our personal injury group.
All right. So it's been quite a winter. I think the first, I looked at the snowfall. I think the first day of snow was December 2016, December 5th. And then we got rid of it for about a week, and then it all came charging back. So have you been busy because of the snow?
We have been very busy because of the snow in motor vehicle accidents, and both motor vehicle accidents and slip and falls, of course.
I found that as we got used to the snow, people got better at driving. At the beginning, it was really kind of scary. But anyway, I interrupted. So it's been busy with the snow.
Yeah, extremely busy. We're not sitting at our windows looking out going, yes, excellent, as personal injury lawyers, accidents everywhere. But there's been a lot of people coming to us that have been injured more than usual, of course, due to these weather conditions, and we're here to help.
Well, I know living in the city of Vancouver, every municipality is different because they have their own snow clearing and sanding and salting procedure. But I live in the city, and the snow removal was non-existent on side streets, and they did nothing through the holidays. And then it was the first, work day after the New Year. They threw all this sand down. But there were literally a couple of weeks there where it was sheet ice. People were sliding all over. I would take my dog. It needs to go out twice a day, whether I like it or not. And I was sliding and slipping on the streets and on the sidewalk. So I know you do mostly car accidents, but I thought maybe, Nate, you could answer this. I mean, the bylaw says that you need to shovel your walk by 10 a.m. the day after a snowstorm, and many people didn't do this. If I fall on someone's front sidewalk because it's icy, is the homeowner at fault, or is it the city? Because you're supposed to do it, and the bylaw hasn't been enforced.
So, yeah, it's two different things. If it's the city sidewalk, you can't sue the homeowner. Mm-hmm. If you're on the homeowner's walkway,
pathway, yeah,
then that's different.
Sure.
And the whole bylaw exists because the city is responsible for ensuring that the sidewalks are safe. And how they protect themselves is they enact regulations that require the homeowners to clear the snow. So that's their defense as well. We enacted these bylaws.
But they didn't enforce them. That was the problem.
Well, exactly. So if they're not enforcing the bylaws, then the bylaws are really useless. So, I mean, obviously this winter was unprecedented. And, if it's 1 or 2 days after the snow, perhaps we can say, they did their best. But as it dragged on, I think that as a community, we're saying this is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And especially when you have elderly people that live in these neighborhoods that can't drive, the only way to get out is to walk. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't.
There was people in mobility chairs.
Absolutely.
Couldn't get out, right?
Yeah. So it really, I think, it degenerated into an unacceptable situation where the city. I don't want to express a legal opinion, but there are certainly cases where they were negligent and people did get injured, and they likely have a claim.
Now, we'll move off of the sidewalk and onto the street. The streets were sheet ice, and people were taking videos of themselves skating on the streets. And this went on because we had all of the snow, and then we had the clear, very cold weather. It was sunny every day. Temperature never really got above freezing. If it did, it went right back below at night. And it was that sort of thaw and freeze cycle that was sheet ice everywhere. And this went on for well over a week. So if you have an accident involving your car, whether you slide right through a stop sign and hit somebody, then is the city at fault at some level?
Potentially they could, yeah. There have been actions in the past where there's been single vehicle accidents where somebody hit some black ice and has sued the city, and they have been held to be partially liable there. The defense in that case from the city is going to be, well, you didn't have proper tires or you were going too fast.
But I do have proper tires on my car, and I did slide right through a stop sign.
Well, then absolutely you would have a potential action against the city in that circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Because it's their property. They have the obligation to keep it safe.
So there's policies in place that the city has when it comes to the ice and whatnot, and it's really whether that policy is reasonable or not can be examined. But once that policy is in place and they've taken it on to ensure that we're safe on the streets, it's the implementation of the policy that we really have to look at and whether they met that reasonable standard.
And while doing nothing is not, in my opinion, a reasonable standard.
Yes. There's two sides to look at this, of course, and the city is going to say, and that's why the city has more defenses in these cases than, say, just a regular occupier of a premises that might be unsafe. It's because they have so much terrain to take care of and whatnot, and only so many tax dollars to use. So that's what the courts would look at, is whether the implementation of this policy was in fact reasonable and sufficient.
Now, when we have this complicating factor with very slippery conditions, when car accidents happen and the insurers divide fault, is it typically more evenly split because of the weather situation, because there were so many circumstances involved?
Dependent on each case.
Everything's different.
Yeah, of course. So I'll give an example maybe. If there's someone who blows through a stop sign and they end up running into you, but because in these winter conditions you attempted to stop to avoid the collision, you didn't have proper tires on your vehicle and you slid ahead and the accident happened as a result of that, ICBC would probably turn and look at you and say, well, you didn't have proper winter tires on, and that wasn't reasonable in the circumstances, so you could be held somewhat, they'd apportion some blame on you for that accident, even though the other person, in fact, went through the stop sign. Right.
I always wonder why insurance companies aren't stricter with the implementation of winter tires, because we have so many prestige cars in the Lower Mainland that are running on just straight summer tires, and I'd be surprised if the insurer doesn't say, hey, you're not doing anything to help yourself here.
Yeah, I know on provincial highways, of course, you see the signs out there and you can be fined if you don't have the proper tires on your vehicle in those cases. However, I believe in the cities and municipalities it's not the case, but when ICBC is looking at it, of course, it could affect the liability, as I mentioned, portion of distribution that there is in their assessment of the claim and the courts.
All right, that's the voice of Kevin Hyde. He's a partner at Macquarie Hunter. And also joining us in studio is Nate Hartney, associate at Macquarie Hunter, talking about personal injury. And we're going to get into the myths of what personal injury is. So why don't you just give us a broad umbrella of what the term means, personal injury? Is it just any time you're injured?
Yeah, I mean, personal injuries, you're dealing with harms and losses is, I think, the simplest way to think about it. You've been injured and you suffered a loss as a result. So it could be physical injuries, it could be psychological injuries, basically anything. It's a broad term.
Okay. Now, are there myths around personal injury that we can talk about? Like, we touched on a little bit earlier. Like, if you hire Macquarie Hunter to represent you, are you going to go to trial?
Yeah, we have a lot of, I've heard a lot of stories. There's a lot of people that come in and they're very anxious because they believe that once they've hired a lawyer and once that notice of civil claim has been filed on their behalf, initiating a legal proceeding, taking it into litigation, that means, hey, I'm going to have to appear in front of a judge, and that's very stressful in a courtroom and whatnot. That's not the case at all. In fact, I believe the stats would show about 96 to 98% of these claims, in fact, settle well before you enter into a courtroom. So yes, and I believe that not all adjusters, but I believe that this is a tactic often used by adjusters to scare people away from meeting with a lawyer, because in reality, that's the last thing that they want is for, and you see this from their ad campaign as well, is for people to go and talk to a lawyer who can properly give them advice on what their claim is worth and when it is the time to settle. ICBC is trying to push this forward and get you to sign that release as quickly as possible before we even know what these injuries are and what the impact of these injuries is going to be, 2 months from now, 5 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, 30 years from now.
And so their argument is, why would you hire somebody to share some of your settlement when you can just deal with us directly and we'll get this done quickly? And for some people, they're going to get a check or they're going to get something quickly. That's enticing to them. But your advice is find out where you stand, right?
Oh, absolutely. You shouldn't be signing any sort of release of a tort claim with ICBC prior to speaking with a lawyer about your injuries, if in fact you are injured. And that's what our job is to do, to guide you through this stressful process. Because even if they tell you you're sharing a percentage of it with a lawyer on a retainer agreement, contingency fee agreement, that percentage of, 100% of $10,000 versus 75% of $100,000 is quite the difference. And the reality is, before I became a personal injury lawyer, $10,000 sounded like a lot of fun ski trips to the hill and beer money to me. But the reality is you wouldn't know right away when the ICBC is putting this release in front of you what your injuries are. And that's where we help. We will only settle your claim once, you're fully recovered from your injuries, or alternatively, if your injuries have plateaued and we have a firm prognosis of what these injuries look like going forward, and that would be from either your GP or physiatrist, orthopedic surgeon, whatever the case may be.
Have you ever had, can you cite a file, not say who they are, but just say that somebody came in and they thought, well, this was quite minor, but as time went by, it became more serious? Well,
we've had several people come to us after the fact, and that's why I can't stress enough how important it is before you sign.
And can you go back and revisit or no?
You cannot, unless there's very, very rare circumstances if the person didn't have capacity to sign that release. They're essentially entering into that contract with the ICBC adjuster, or maybe they were under some form of duress if ICBC was completely pressuring them in some, but that again is an extremely uphill battle, and most lawyers wouldn't take those cases on. And we have people coming back to us after the fact with ongoing injuries saying, I've had to miss work, I've re-injured myself, I've re-aggravated these injuries, I'm missing work, I'm, still haven't been able to play hockey, return to hockey, and it's over a year since the injury, and I signed this release with ICBC within, a couple of weeks after I was injured.
Is that basically what you look at, what you were able to do before the accident and what you're able to do after? Is that really the litmus test?
That's exactly what we're doing. We're looking at the person's life before the accident. That's why you have to feel very comfortable with your lawyer, because we need to see what your life was like before the accident and where it was going, but for this accident. And then we need to learn about your life after the accident, from even intimate details of what's been going on in your personal relationships with your family and so on, that could flow from your actual injuries from these accidents. Chronic pain is something that, as we said before, not only has the physical injuries that you experience, but can also have emotional and psychological injury as well. And you can be compensated for those.
Have you ever turned it on its head and had somebody come in and say, you really don't need our assistance here, or this looks pretty straightforward? Have you ever done that?
Oh, of course we have. We have people come in all the time and they say, well, this lasted about 2 weeks and ICBC is offering me a couple $1,000s. Well, we wouldn't likely take that on. We say, well, before you sign this release, you can come back and we'll look over it with you.
Or should you say wait a little while to see if anything changes?
Yeah, we say that as well. Make sure you're confident that your injuries have resolved first, and go see your doctor. And if he gives you the A-OK and says you don't need any more treatment, you're pretty much going to be back, no long-term consequences from this accident, and you're pretty much going to be back to how you were pre-accident level, then by all means, we'll advise you that we don't need to take a percentage out of that, and you should go ahead and sign that release as long as that's supported by we're not doctors, but as long as that's supported by whoever's treating you, your treating physician.
We're just getting into the myths about personal injury and what you do at McQuarrie Hunter. We have Kevin Hyde, partner at McQuarrie Hunter, and Nate Hartney, associate in the personal injury division there, right? It's, I always get it wrong, Surrey Central?
Central City?
Central Surrey? It's
either
like
or.
A tongue twister. I always, you say it.
I don't know what it is. I just work there.
I think they're both right. I think they're both right.
Surrey Center. We'll go with that. McQuarrie Hunter. All right. I'm going to write it down. That's probably a good idea. And we'll continue our conversation next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.